Hello, everyone. You're listening to Random Sage with Maryann from Revealing Light. Welcome to my podcast. Whether you're joining me via audio only through Apple and other Spotify, other podcast platforms, or whether you're looking at me on YouTube under my Random Sage channel, welcome, welcome, welcome. Today, I want to talk about my new book. It's coming out in 2 days. It's titled Revealing Light, How Cancer Illuminated My Divine Blueprint. It's best described, I guess, as a spiritual memoir. In it, I cover the cancer years. And throughout the pages, you will see how spirit showed me that there was more to this than being gravely ill, having a life-changing experience. Spirit showed up time and time and time again through physical signs, through my clairvoyance growing, through synchronicities, through putting me in touch with the right people at the right time, through loving support. I can say that spirit offered me a safety net when I desperately needed one. When you're anyone who has had any loss at all, whether you're grieving for the loss of a loved one, whether you've had a fairly significant health illness diagnosis, whether you've lost everything, however it is that you've lost everything, or whether, like me, you get a diagnosis of cancer and you go through the treatment, which is in itself sometimes worse than the actual diagnosis, radical surgery, chemotherapy and radiation, pelvic radiation, in my case. If you're like me, it's traumatic, and it tests you in ways that you wouldn't have been tested before in your life. So the book covers that period, and then it looks at I guess it's not growing presence. It's like the clairvoyance that I've had all my life, the psychic abilities that I've had all my life step forward. It's like that part of me stepped forward. And I guess that happened because the physical part of me could no longer operate in the same way. I had been a manager. I had always had a very strong career in journalism, editing, government policy and communication management, editing, communications. I had studied endlessly at university for two degrees and a postgraduate diploma. I put everything into that, and my family. My family and my career were my two great loves. And of course, after the diagnosis, it changed my life, and I lost that. My family remained the constant in my life, and the gratitude that I have for that is immeasurable. In the book, I cover the fact that my elder sister, who I had been so close to all my life, we shared a room for the first part of my life. I babysat her kids. She was my phone a friend. I was her phone a friend. We went through exactly the same treatment together, same cancer, same place, only hers at a later stage. Unfortunately, she passed away, and I survived. And so we cover all of that. working through survivor's guilt, learning to use these latent abilities, bring them forward, and to listen to spirit as to what I was supposed to do with my life at a time when I would have been giving the best in my career for the last decade. I had to search for what it was that I should be doing. I began periods of intensive study. I'd studied with various esoteric subjects all my life, been a wide reader, because I was always very interested in trying to look at why I knew things before they happened. So I began studying again in earnest, with shamans, with mediums, with psychics. And it led me to establishing a YouTube channel, and this podcast, Random Sage podcast, and various other spiritual social media channels. And the book covers all of that. How I transformed, because that's what a kind of a death is like, of, a 360, a death of who I was and a finding of who I really was. That's how it works. It's a huge transformation, and it covers that transformation, and it covers the spiritual reality that presented itself to me, and the afterlife. And so I wrote that book. It took me 7 years, because I put the pen down, or the computer laptop down, for a few years after my sister passed. I just had writer's block. I couldn't go on. And in 2023 I took it up again, or 2022, and I completed the book. And so what it means for me is to illuminate, I guess, these kinds of periods in our lives where we feel at our lowest, at our darkest, and to bring forward a process, a process that is very realistic. In the early days after cancer, I just thought I would return to my old life. Treatment left me with several disabilities, and they follow me right up until this day. I'm in a fair bit of, I guess, pain as a result of those legacies, and acceptance of that, finding a way through. I won't say never, because my faith does waver from time to time when I'm particularly ill, but in the main, getting back up, keeping the faith, and learning to care and nurture myself, and find ways through illness and disability now. I want to read just a little bit of the book. It's about actually choosing which is the best chapter to read to you. I think I'm going to read the chapter titled Blue Crows. This was particularly a time in the journey where I had a psychological breakthrough, because illness and cancer and grief and loss leave a tremendous amount of trauma that has to be worked through. So I'll read you chapter 20, titled Blue Crows. It is said, when a crow comes to you, it brings a message that major change is taking place in your life, and that you can adapt to anything. The crow is a reminder of the creation that resides within us all, and in the world around us, the power we have to determine our future. That's a modified quote, I guess, author unknown. It 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 this chapter was written after I had two particular crows that walked with me every day, and one day they flew into the sunset, and they weren't black, they were blue, and I got quite a lot of insight in that present moment. Here's the chapter anyway. I began writing about my cancer journey around February 2015 after I was diagnosed with cancer. I had celebrated my 53rd birthday a month before I was diagnosed, and my youngest son was heading into final years at school. I was the main breadwinner for the family. I was finally starting to relax a little after the hard decades of working and raising a family. There might be a little more freedom round the corner, or so I thought. Instead, freedom gave way to restriction, potential liberation, to a fight for survival. As you have seen from my story, fear was the single biggest emotion that confronted me when I heard those words. Oh, yes, there are definitely cancer cells there. That fear, along with my old friends' faith, hope, and courage, stayed with me throughout the long treatment and into its aftermath. In the latter part of my journey, something else emerged. It replaced the positiveness and certainty that my life would return to normal. Like a veteran coming to terms with the battlefield, I traveled through post-traumatic stress, depression, and anxiety, and finally towards the realization that cancer and its treatment had disabled me, and I would never again return to normal. I was broken and I was weak physically, mentally, and psychologically. A long road stretched before me when active treatment finished. Once the daily fight for survival had finished, the drive and determination that is so characteristic of cancer fighters made way for a listless new reality. My spiritual compass, which had been so strong in the past, was shaky with weariness, unable to pinpoint any satisfactory way home. Where was home? As muted as my mind and emotions were, so too was my spirit. An unrelenting cold wind seemed to blow across the grey landscape that defined my life post-cancer. I began therapy again. I struggled to resume a normal life with the disability that comes when so much radical surgery has been undertaken. While no one could see my amputations, they were as real as any war veteran who returned home with missing limbs. I kept searching for the usual signs from the universe. The hope that had been my suffering was for a purpose, that old serendipity that had occupied my life before cancer and was responsible for the reprieves and the miraculous during tough times. There were stops and starts, of course. No life is completely devoid of inspiration. I took up Reiki and found an aptitude for hands-on energy work. My psychic senses became more attuned. Despite the spiritual guidance I thought I received, I discovered one sustainable truth, that cancer had opened a gaping wound in my spirit, and it would take discipline and willingness to clean out that wound and heal it. I doubted whether I had the strength to rise like I had done so many times in my life. Luckily, my spirit, that invisible knowingness, knew which direction to head in. Even if my conscious mind and heart were still down that black hole, the first step was to confront my fear, not just to calm myself with Pollyanna thoughts, but to really eliminate the psychological fears and other negative emotions that had stunted my growth. My biggest fear was death. As a child, I was forever rescuing baby lambs left to die by their mothers on the farm. Sometimes I was successful. I got to them before the crows managed to swoop and pick their eyes out. From a very young age, I learned to dislike crows despite a deep connection to other bird life. When my good friend Sue unsubscribed a year before my cancer diagnosis, I began to be plagued by crows, nestling in trees outside my bedroom window. As I dealt with the fallout and grief from his death, the crows just wouldn't leave me alone. Their endless cawing drove me mad. I spoke to my meditation group about them. It seems they are trying to tell you something, and I just don't speak crow. I laughed. Their incessant cawing stopped once I was diagnosed, but they were still in residence in the trees outside my home. I believe those crows were trying to get a message to me that something terrible was wrong with me physically. One day after surgery, radiation, and chemo had finished, I was walking on the golf course near my house. The course was unused at specific times of the day, and I was a lone walker with kilometres of beautiful fairway trees and landscape gardens. It was about 4 p.m. on a late winter's afternoon. I was walking up the fairway towards home. At some point, I became conscious of the crow flying toward me. It flew towards me and then parallel to me into the afternoon sun. I couldn't take my eyes off it. Rather than the disdain I usually felt for the crows, I was in awe of this one. It was the most beautiful bird I'd ever seen. That moment, which seemed to last forever, began my connections to a bird I disliked and perhaps even feared since my childhood. Rather than the bringer of death, the black crow became a symbol of life. From that afternoon, at least 2 or 3 crows accompanied me on my walks. I began to treat them as friends, and I feared less and began to question more. I like to think those blue crows that visited me with their incessant cawing were trying to warn me that cancer was ticking away in my body. I also like to think they are my totem, friends helping me to confront and overcome my fears. It's a long process rewiring old patterns. There are no magical solutions. There are lessons, though, and I know that because of the blue crows, a symbol of my journey through cancer and beyond, I no longer fear the blackness. I spoke of change in the introduction to this book. I predicted quite correctly when I began writing this book in 2015 that change would dominate my form from cancer, my life from cancer diagnosis forward. I thought of change back then as a catalyst, something powerful enough to shift the bedrock of life. For me, cancer was that change. It brought loss of quality of life, of identity, and of physical strength and ableness. It delivered loss of my old career, and perhaps most significantly, it was responsible for the loss of innocence. Death came out of the closet, but so did life. While cancer simply train wrecked a lot of my life, it also changed a lot for the better. I am stronger and more resilient. I understand more. I experience more. I am more. I have knowledge and understanding I never would have had without passing through the furnace of cancer diagnosis and treatment. Spiritually, I've grown in inestimable ways. I rarely ask why me anymore. I also spoke about the need to talk about cancer. While cancer is invasive and treatment harsh, if caught early, and if you listen to your body, it can be treatable. My cancer was caught reasonably early, and I'm thankful for that. Today, I walk a new path that is transforming my life. I'm still on my healing journey with much to learn and experience. You see, I'm forever the student. The consistency throughout this book has been the many examples of the presence of a universal life force guiding and supporting me through intense physical pain and suffering. Nothing about cancer and its treatment is easy, yet during those long days in hospital or alone on those grey afternoons with intensifying pain, I always felt the closeness of this universal life force. It was there in the random coincidences, and it revealed itself through meaning, through white feathers in my path, the friends who called up when needed, and the guides and mentors that showed up when most needed. I know there is no reason to fear the dark, a metaphor for death. My mother often quoted Dylan Thomas's "Do not go gentle into the good night." Do not go gentle into that good night, he wrote. Old age should burn and rave at close of day. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. I now understood that we do indeed go on beyond this life into the light of home, not the darkness of oblivion. Knowing that, believing in a spiritual dimension is mostly enough for me, including on a bad day. My blue crows remind me that I'm never alone, that there is purpose and meaning in this life, and that life can be magical even in the darkest of hours. How we respond to change does indeed determine who we become. How we respond to change does indeed determine who we become. Although I am still becoming, I sometimes get a glimpse of a clear blue sky, a look at what my life can be like in the future. I am slowly moving towards that promise despite the aftermath of cancer and its treatment, and listening to my intuition, understanding that my old life is no longer possible. As I move through and beyond the cancer that altered my life irrevocably, I am beginning to see that this was always the path, the change that provoked the falling away of the old to reveal something new, albeit in its infancy. My journey from here is to nurture and treasure my new life, recognizing that within the blackness, there is always the creative potential for life and light beyond cancer. My spiritual journey, so entwined with my healing, was only just beginning. Life is precious. Meaning and light can be found even in the dark. And I want to say that that is one of the most important messages of the book. Meaning and light can be found often within the dark. All right, that's the podcast Revealing Light, 28th of January. Thank you everybody who have pre-ordered a copy. I'm grateful. I'm nervous and well, I won't say excited. I guess I'm nervous at the publication of the book. But at the same time, it will achieve what I set out to achieve, which is firstly to honor my sister who passed away, Jane. And I want to say that my middle son has just had his second child. It's a girl, my first granddaughter, and they've named her Estelle Jane. Estelle Jane. The Jane is in tribute and to honor my sister. Okay, still brings a tear to my eyes. It's probably time to go. Thank you very much for tuning in. Bye for now.